If you have a child that's in school and you're like, well, how do I know if my child is getting phonics or instruction that is evidence-based? Then this episode is definitely for you. Today we're breaking down exactly what evidence-based phonics instruction is, structured literacy, and what schools are doing about it. You're going to leave learning today and knowing exactly what science of reading says about phonics and what other considerations you need to know in order to make sure your child is getting what they need to learn to read. So if you've been anywhere near the world of education lately, you know there's a huge debate called the reading wars. And this centers around phonics and really ensuring that our learners are getting structured literacy, which means we focus on evidence-based phonics. Now, if you're wondering what evidence-based is, that's a big term right now. In fact, it's a buzzword, especially with the recent announcement from the Trump administration that they intend to make sure and double down on evidence-based reading instruction in the classroom. So first, let's define it. Evidence-based is just fancy talk for backed by science. And right now, what science has really shown us is that children need, in fact, 90% of children basically in general, need systematic phonics. Sounds great because it makes sense. I mean, a lot of us didn't get that type of instruction, and we're finding out there's a lot of things that we didn't know, and we're remembering some of the struggles that we had, and we see how it might have helped us. So it definitely sounds great, but it's a little more complex than just that. So let's dig in. So it sounds good, right? I mean, we want what's going to help our children become confident readers. And it definitely does prepare them for this, especially in the early phases of learning to read. But here's where it gets tricky. Phonics isn't everything, and some schools have started to focus so much on phonics that they're leaving out other really critical components, such as comprehension and ensuring that our students are reading with expression and other components that are very important to being a reader that can analyze text, connect to text, and actually do the things that we want children to be able to do to be full-blown confident readers. In fact, I've seen this a lot lately with programs out there that are encouraging parents to focus so much on phonics, but they're leaving out other components like wordplay, phonemic awareness, and comprehension. Also, something called concepts about print. Our children need all of these skills in order to be really well-grounded readers. So this is being overlooked a bit, and we want to make sure that our children are getting this. Remember, just being able to sound out a word doesn't mean they're going to understand what that word means. We need to be giving our children these other strategies to help them become solid, confident readers. Another thing to consider is that one size doesn't fit all. I mean, we know this. Children learn in different ways, and evidence-based tends to be code for very rigid and strict. In fact, when I was in the classroom, we had such strict rules. It wasn't in my last district, but prior to that, we had such strict rules that at one point, they wanted to be able to walk into any classroom in that grade level and for us to all be on the same page of instruction. So that's an extreme, but we do get into these very rigid pigeonhole type boxes, and we want to be careful with that. We need to be able, as educators, as parents, and caregivers, to do what's right for each individual child. Children who are second language learners, children who may have some learning differences, or just don't learn the way that the program is designed, are all things that we want to keep in mind. We all want to keep these children in mind as we are proceeding with instruction, whether it's in your homeschool or you are a classroom educator or an administrator. We want to keep in mind that We have to be on the lookout for children that need that extra assistance and might need a different strategy. Here's another way that it gets really tricky. Not all evidence-based programs are created equal. I'm getting out my hand signals. This is how I know I'm a kindergarten teacher, right? Or I was. But really, there's a lot of programs, out there that a lot of money goes into designing these programs. And, the cost of redeveloping an entire curriculum or paying for an entire curriculum or new curriculum is just exorbitant. And so what we see is some of these publishers rebranding their curriculum, but they're not really changing it. They're just saying, oh, it's based on the science of reading. And then you are looking through it and you're like, wait a minute, they're doing full-blown sight words. And we know that we're not supposed to be doing sight words like that. So we really need to keep an awareness, and we need to be educated about what is backed by science so that when we come across this, we can make sure to address it. And of course, with evidence-based instruction, it doesn't address some of the bigger problems that are behind some of the challenges that we see in education. We have communities that experience a huge amount of poverty or other circumstances that make it very, very hard to access things that make their child more reading ready. And one of those things is called cultural capital. And that's a very fancy term for just having life experience, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So I think that's one of the things that we need to clarify and really debunk. Having experiences or providing your child with experiences does not need to be expensive. There are free park days at different exhibits and attractions. There are free admittance days at different museums. Just going to different experiences, the park, the mountains, the ocean. Yes, those things do cost money to get there. We have gas or transportation fees, but we can find ways to do those activities at a minimum. Of course, we also know that some families don't have access to this just because they are so busy working and they have to work in order to provide and make ends meet. So we do have issues like that where we have children coming into their school years without that background knowledge to connect to text. And we have learned that this is an extremely important piece of being ready to take on reading. It doesn't teach you how to read because that's where phonics comes in, but it does prepare you to be able to connect to text and to process text. So here's how you can advocate for your child. First of all, realize that if your child is in an in-person school setting, their teacher has little to no flexibility or control over what they're being told to do. And I can testify to this. I had a system, I did my whole dissertation on it, and it was fabulous. Every year I had students that started at one point and they were ready, and upon going out the door, they had made such strides. There was such success using this very skill-based system. But I was told upon a new implementation in the district that I would not have time for this system that was working. I had to try this new system that basically was abandoned after 1 year because it wasn't working. So remember, teachers, they don't have that flexibility or control. And that gets into a whole different arena. But if you want to be aware of what your child is learning, find out what the name of the curriculum is. Go online and really look into it and find out. Ask those tough questions. Are they doing sight words? Are they doing the 3 cueing system? You want to know those terms so that you can be aware and you can get the information. Next, you're going to want to make sure your child has access to books, whether that be checking them out at the library or doing a book exchange. But an opportunity to have access to literature is still a huge component in becoming a reader. And you know, word on the street right now, yes, it doesn't teach them how to read to just sit them down with a book and hope they read. That's not what I'm talking about here, but really giving them a rich print environment, a lot of books to access. And again, you don't have to buy these books. You can go to the library, you can do a text exchange or a book exchange with maybe a church or a group, maybe something at the school. But in any case, oftentimes we notice that the more children have access to books, the more likely they are to read. This is especially true if we're doing the majority of our reading through worksheets. That's not the reading that we want to focus on, because that's not as enjoyable. So circling back to when I talked about decodable text in a previous episode, we really want to make sure that we're giving children also books that they can read and enjoy on their own, and reading to them books that maybe are a little above their level, but they're getting so much vocabulary and interaction. Remember, reading is not just a skill, it's a connection to the world. And it is completely worthwhile to make sure that your child is getting the very best in reading instruction. I encourage you to subscribe right here for all of my weekly tips on how to teach your child to read at home. And check out my sister channel, Dr. Deanna's Learning for Littles, where I have full episodes for littles ages 3 to 8 to help them learn blending and phonics in the funnest of ways. If this video helped you to feel more informed, I encourage you to hit that like button and subscribe for all the videos and tips that I give every single week. Make sure to share this with another friend who has a learning little, and I'll see you next time.